Hey guys, tonight we're entering the wild, swirling world of 1860s American parenting, the only era in history where a cough, a stubbed toe, or a case of the Mondays could all be cured with a generous dash of morphine. Yes, morphine. For children, the ultimate bedtime story ingredient. Before we descend into this syrupy carnival of questionable medical wisdom, do me a favour, like the video and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy what I do here. Leave a comment telling me the weirdest home remedy your family ever used growing up. Did grandma insist that vapor rub cured heartbreak? Did your uncle treat bee stings with whiskey? I want to know. Now, dim the lights, put on a fan for that soothing white noise, get comfortable, and maybe tuck your feet in just in case you wake up with a mysterious new prescription. Let's pause and think. What did it feel like to be a parent in the 1860s, holding a glass bottle with a handwritten label that just reads soothing syrup, and no ingredients list in sight? Did anyone read the instructions? Did anyone survive reading the instructions? How many children got morphine for teething, tummy aches, or just for existing on a Tuesday? Did anyone ask a pharmacist? Or did they just grab whatever looked the least like paint thinner? Could you survive a day as a 19th century parent? Or would you accidentally put your toddler to sleep until 1875? And now, congratulations, you've just woken up in the year 1865, in a bustling American town. You are the proud parent of 3 children and 1 bottle of laudanum. The doctor is nowhere in sight, but don't worry, the apothecary is always open, and there's a solution for every problem. Spoiler, it's usually morphine. Good luck. You open your eyes to the sound of a child shrieking about a phantom toothache. Before you can say just rub some dirt on it, your spouse hands you a bottle labelled Mrs. Winslow's Soothing Syrup. You have no idea what's in it, but the label promises peaceful slumber, guaranteed. There's a rooster crowing somewhere, and for once you're grateful for the background noise. It distracts you from the possibility you're about to accidentally tranquilize your offspring. You're not even out of bed yet, but the stakes are already high. The wood floor is freezing, your back feels like you lost a bar brawl with your own mattress, and your youngest has somehow managed to tangle herself in both the blanket and her own nightgown. Welcome to parenthood, 1860s style, where the first challenge of every day is, how many of your children are screaming, and how many are simply lost somewhere in the folds of the bedding? The sun's not even up, but the baby's up, and that means everyone's up. You shuffle to the washstand, splash your face with ice-cold water from a chipped porcelain bowl, and listen as another child begins wailing about a splinter that mysteriously appeared overnight. Your spouse mutters something about just dose him, but you're still not sure if that means morphine, whiskey, or another brisk slap with a washcloth. The medicine cabinet, if you could call it that, is a wooden shelf sagging with brown bottles and tins. Some have labels, some don't. All promise to soothe or calm or guarantee a good night's rest, which in 1865 is code for may knock you out cold. There's a faint lingering scent of camphor, licorice, and desperation. The household is run on a blend of faith, guesswork, and whatever syrup happens to be closest to the top of the pile. Let's talk about this syrup. You inspect the bottle, squinting at the tiny type. The ingredient list is both reassuringly brief and deeply terrifying. Morphia, spirits, sugar, essence of caraway. You have questions, but no one to ask them. There is no pharmacist's warning label. No call your doctor if you experience time travel. The directions are simple. Administer to child as needed for relief. Which, if you're being honest, is pretty much every day ending in Y. Breakfast isn't even on the table, but you're already improvising a treatment plan. Is it really teething pain, or did the child just want to try the good stuff before chores begin? You recall stories from the neighbours. Their toddler slept 14 hours after a teaspoon of Mrs. Winslow's. Their teenager once took a dose for nerves and missed his own birthday. You're starting to suspect the biggest childhood hazard isn't the lack of seatbelts or food hygiene, but the fact that every minor discomfort is an excuse for a pharmacological experiment. You take a deep breath, reminding yourself that statistically, most children survive both the remedies and the afflictions. The older kids, meanwhile, have invented a game called Who Can Cough the Loudest, a clear attempt to score extra syrup or at least an unscheduled nap. You threaten to swap out the soothing syrup for a mustard plaster, and suddenly, everyone's pain seems much less urgent. Downstairs, the kitchen smells like burnt coffee, bacon, and whatever is currently fermenting in the pantry. The family cat is stalking a spilled bottle of infant cordial, while the dog sits with a worried look, likely recalling the incident with the castor oil last week. Your spouse is already filling bowls with hot porridge, insisting that breakfast is the best medicine. You're not sure whether to laugh, cry, or check the porridge for unexpected ingredients. By now the sun is up, your nerves are frazzled, and you're starting to appreciate the appeal of all those sleepy Victorian children in old photographs. Maybe they weren't naturally docile, maybe they were just mildly sedated day and night, thanks to the best that 19th century chemistry could offer. You finally take a seat, eyeing the bottle of syrup. Is this what they mean by starting the day right? You wonder, not for the first time, how anyone survived childhood before Google, paediatricians, or even basic skepticism. One thing is certain. In the 1860s, the only thing stronger than a child's scream at dawn was a parent's resolve and a little something extra, dispensed by the teaspoon just in case. You shuffle to the cabinet and are greeted by a rainbow of glass bottles. Opium, morphine, God knows what else. Some say soothing, some say cure-all, none say FDA approved. You're not sure if you're treating your child's fever or preparing to host a Victorian rave. Decisions, decisions. The cabinet itself is a relic. A battered pine box with a wobbly door and hinges that shriek louder than a child with an unmedicated earache. Inside, it's a pharmacy, apothecary, and low-budget chemistry lab all rolled into one. You've got every colour, every shape, every label you can barely read. Some of the bottles are stoppered with cork, others with wax, and at least one with what appears to be chewed-up newspaper. There are tonics, elixirs, tinctures, and the ever-popular cordials, which is code for contains alcohol, just enough to knock out a bear. The air is thick with the competing scents of menthol, sassafras, licorice, and pure, undiluted panic. Let's break down the greatest hits. First up, laudanum, the Swiss Army knife of Victorian medicine. Got a toothache? Laudanum. Trouble sleeping? Laudanum. Existential dread about the state of your kitchen wallpaper? You guessed it. Laudanum. Next is Mrs. Winslow's soothing syrup, starring enough morphine to drop an ox. The bottle boasts relief from teething, coughs, and general irritability. Basically, if your child is conscious and making noise, there's a syrup for that. Then there's paregoric, an opium-infused concoction, advertised as the perfect remedy for restless children. Not to be outdone, there's Godfrey's cordial, which sounds like something your friendly neighbour would serve at tea, but is, in reality, a potent blend of opium and treacle. The only thing more common than morphine in this cabinet is wishful thinking. The labels themselves are an adventure. Some are elaborate, with gilded edges and illustrations of cherubic babies smiling as though they haven't just ingested an adult dose of narcotic. Others are handwritten in a script so elaborate it might as well be a treasure map. Almost all claim miraculous results. Side effects? Never mentioned. You start to realise that every bottle is a gamble, one dose away from a peaceful afternoon or a trip to the town undertaker. And then there are the natural remedies. Dried willow bark, pennyroyal, licorice root, ancient solutions wedged between the narcotics, as if to reassure you that Mother Nature has your back. Your mother-in-law swears by camphorated oil for coughs. The neighbour insists that a thimble of turpentine mixed with honey cures any fever. No one can quite agree on which is worse, the cure or the complaint. Deciding which bottle to use becomes a family debate. One child is wailing about a sore throat, another has a mysterious rash, and the baby is chewing the corner of a chair. Your spouse is rooting through the bottles like a gold miner in the California hills, convinced that the cherry pectoral is the answer to all problems. You, meanwhile, are eyeing the bottle labelled Dr. Mumble's Miracle Tonic, a mysterious brown liquid with an aroma somewhere between burnt sugar and paint thinner. You pause to wonder, is this the secret to 19th century family life? Keep everyone just drowsy enough to get through breakfast, chores, and the weekly laundry marathon? The neighbours don't seem to mind. In fact, everyone on your street has their own cabinet of questionable cures. You swap stories, bottles, and occasionally apologies when someone accidentally administers a tablespoon instead of a teaspoon, and their child spends the afternoon chasing imaginary frogs around the yard. Still, for all the chaos, there's a strange sort of comfort in these bottles. They're a tangible symbol of hope. You may not know how most of them work or what's in them, but you believe deep down that something in this cabinet is the key to peace and quiet. Maybe that's the real medicine, the desperate optimism that tomorrow will be less noisy, less itchy, less everything. You close the cabinet door, hearing the bottles clink together like a sleepy lullaby. Tomorrow, there'll be another complaint, another concoction, another round of decisions. For now, you've survived the morning. In the great parade of bottles, hope springs eternal, and so does the gentle, ever-present aroma of questionable medicine. It's time for breakfast. You serve porridge, bacon, and a little spoonful of Mother's Helper for anyone complaining about anything. Why not? The label says it's great for teething, colic, restlessness, and general childhood. Even the cat seems interested. The morning routine has a rhythm, equal parts chaos, improvisation, and blind trust in the bottle's promise to keep your offspring, and possibly your sanity, intact until noon. You slide bowls down the rough-hewn table, scraping chairs over the floorboards that seem to groan in sympathy. There's a hint of burnt coffee in the air, a wisp of wood smoke, and that telltale medicinal aroma, an odd blend of licorice, ethanol, and something that definitely isn't found in nature. The kids eye the steaming bowls of porridge with deep suspicion. They know the drill. Porridge is the law, bacon is the bribe, and Mother's Helper is the loophole. Your eldest tries to barter an extra strip of bacon in exchange for skipping the syrup, but you've been here before. You gently remind them that restless children get a dose, cooperative children get two. Suddenly, everyone is on their best behaviour, or at least as close to it as a family of sugar-charged, opiate-tempered children can get. The baby, still gum-deep in the agony of teething, receives her morning spoonful with a trusting, open-mouthed yawn. The effect is almost immediate. Her whimpering fades, her eyelids droop, and she contemplates the existential nature of porridge in blissful silence. It's like watching a cranky werewolf turn back into a slightly dazed puppy. Meanwhile, the middle child is inventing reasons for extra helpings of medicine. I have a headache. My shoe feels sad. What if I have the plague? You check the label. It does, in fact, claim to be effective against all manner of childish complaints, real or imagined. That's either an honest promise or the first recorded case of a pharmaceutical company just giving up. As everyone tucks in, you reflect on the genius, or sheer desperation, of 1860s American breakfast medicine. There's no time for picky eaters, allergy warnings, or special requests. If you're under 5 feet tall and living in this house, you get whatever's being served and a liquid side order of enforced tranquility. You take a moment to pour a cup of coffee for yourself. It's strong enough to melt a spoon, which is just as well because you're pretty sure the spoons have absorbed enough laudanum residue over the years to qualify as medical devices. Your spouse grabs a fork and sighs contentedly. Remember last week when we ran out of the syrup? I thought the kids were going to form a union. As the meal winds down, you notice the cat is still circling the table, tail twitching hopefully. You lock eyes with the feline, both of you aware that the line between child and family pet is thinner than you'd like to admit when it comes to medicine distribution. The dog, less subtle, is already curled up under the table, hoping someone will drop a bacon rind, or perhaps just fall asleep mid-bite. There's a brief debate about whether the oldest child, who stubbed a toe yesterday, needs a booster dose. You sigh and reach for the bottle, already calculating how many teaspoons are left before the next trip to the apothecary. This is why I can't have nice things, you mutter, as the syrup slowly coats the spoon and the air. Outside, the world is waking up. Horses clop along the street, milk pails clank, and somewhere in the distance, a neighbour is already yelling about unruly children. You send your own kids off to school, slightly glazed, remarkably compliant, and probably the quietest they'll be all week. The teacher will know exactly which parents topped off breakfast with a little helper. As you tidy up the dishes, you wonder if one day people will look back and marvel at this routine, how a generation survived mornings on a foundation of porridge, bacon, and the best pharmacology the 19th century could bottle. Then again, maybe the real miracle isn't the medicine. Maybe it's that anyone ever got out the door at all. And just as you close the lid on the syrup, you catch the cat eyeing you with that familiar, knowing stare. If you weren't careful, you'd swear even she's plotting to sneak a dose before lunch. The baby's gums are red and puffy. The neighbours recommend rubbing them with whiskey, but you reach for the tiny dropper of morphine instead. Apparently, nothing soothes a cranky infant like the stuff they use for battlefield surgery. What could possibly go wrong? You stare at your child, cheeks glowing, mouth open in a tiny pink O of misery, fists clenched in protest against the cruel tyranny of incoming teeth. The screaming has reached an operatic pitch, somewhere between fire alarm and unattended bagpipes. You've tried rocking, singing, cold cloths, even an ice cube wrapped in muslin, none of it makes a dent. It's you, the baby, and a pain that has all the subtlety of a cavalry charge. The neighbours have all weighed in, Mrs. Chandler on the left swears by whiskey on the gums, just a dab, not enough to get the baby drunk, but enough to take the edge off. Mr. Grady down the street suggests a slice of raw potato works wonders, but don't ask me why. Old Mrs. Pritchard says clove oil is the answer. Just ignore the crying and the occasional facial paralysis. But you, ever the modern parent, put your faith in the age's finest miracle. Morphine, distilled, bottled, and ready for deployment. You unscrew the cap, marvelling at the tiny glass dropper. It's a work of art, delicate, precise, filled with a syrupy liquid that smells faintly of licorice and danger. The bottle promises soothing relief for infants and children of all ages. You're not sure if that's comforting or the most alarming thing you've read all week. A single drop on the baby's tongue, and the results are swift and dramatic. The howling stops mid-scream, replaced by a look of surprised serenity, as if the child has suddenly remembered being a cloud in a previous life. The baby's little body melts into your arms, and for the first time in hours, maybe days, peace descends on the household. The cat peeks around the corner, suspicious of this sudden tranquility. The dog lifts an ear, then decides this is the safest time to nap in the baby's crib. You take a moment to reflect. If parenting in the 1860s has a theme, it's throw medicine at the problem until everyone is either cured or sleeping. The morphine solution is so common, it comes in every shape and flavour. Soothing syrup, infant's quiet drops, peaceful slumber elixir. All are variations on a theme, chemically induced silence. There's a certain genius to it, if you can ignore the long-term consequences and the creeping sense of dread. Meanwhile, your spouse pokes their head into the room, coffee cup in hand, and whispers, "Did you try the morphine yet?" You nod. There's a silent moment of mutual understanding, the kind that only develops between two people who've tag-teamed a wailing infant at 3 a.m. More times than they care to count. It's not just the baby who benefits. The entire family seems to exhale at once. The older children tiptoe past the crib, reverent as monks. The neighbours relax, no longer bracing for another round of shrieking that echoes through thin walls and open windows. Even the rooster outside crows a little softer, as if not wanting to break the spell. Of course, you know the solution isn't perfect. Sometimes the baby wakes up groggy, looking slightly bewildered, as if she spent the night solving advanced mathematics in her dreams. You read stories in the paper about parents overdoing it, dosing for every sniffle and sore gum, and you resolve once again to use the morphine only for emergencies. Emergencies, of course, being defined as any time anyone in the house wants to nap. Later, you swap stories with other parents. Everyone's got an opinion, a method, a favourite brand. You try to laugh off the guilt, telling yourself that surviving teething is a victory in any century. Someday you'll tell your child how you braved the era of hard floors, endless chores, and teething with nothing but grit, patience, and the world's most overqualified painkiller. Until then, you close the bottle, savour the silence, and count your blessings, one blissfully quiet, morphine-calmed minute at a time. One of your children clutches their belly and wails like they've just seen broccoli for the first time. You don't panic. Instead, you consult the household book of remedies and receipts, which confidently suggests a cordial of laudanum and warm water. You're not sure if it's medicine or the first step in a moonshine recipe. You set the child on a wobbly kitchen chair and reach for the family's medical Bible. A well-thumbed volume with more stains than legible print. Its pages warped by decades of accidental splashes and mysterious powders. The handwriting inside shifts between delicate script and frantic doctor's scrawl, as if each entry was written at a different level of parental desperation. There's a section for stomach complaints, nestled between agues, general and children, terrors of the night. You follow the directions for laudanum cordial, because if the solution for heartbreak, colic and existential dread is the same, who are you to argue? The recipe is wonderfully vague. Add 1 teaspoon laudanum to a half cup warm water, stir well, offer in sips, pray as needed. No mention of side effects, dosing charts, or what to do if the child begins quoting Shakespeare backwards. You prepare the mixture with the precision of a medieval apothecary, stirring until the cloudy liquid looks, if not appealing, at least less menacing. The child eyes the mug warily. It smells funny, they complain. You do your best to look reassuring, recalling that last winter's remedy for croup involved goose grease and a sock, so this is definitely an upgrade. You coax a few sips past their lips. Their wails soften to a whimper, then a sigh. You watch, fascinated as the potion works its magic. Within minutes, your offspring, who just moments ago seemed destined for the undertaker, is melting quietly into their seat, eyelids fluttering, voice fading to a gentle murmur. For a moment, peace reigns. The kitchen, a chaos of half-washed dishes and breakfast crumbs, feels almost tranquil. The other children, sensing an opportunity, sidle up with their own mysterious aches, a sore toe, a ticklish cough, the tragic consequences of running too fast and stopping too suddenly. You weigh each complaint carefully, rationing sympathy and tincture with the experience of a battle-hardened field medic. You glance again at the remedies and receipts. The next suggestion for belly pain involves stewed prunes, castor oil, and a brisk walk to the privy. You're almost relieved you went with the laudanum. The last time you tried prunes, the aftermath was enough to haunt your dreams. And as for castor oil, you still recall the taste with a shudder, a flavour that lingers longer than regret. As the morning unfolds, you marvel at the sheer creativity of historical medicine. Everything is treated with a cordial, a tonic, or a syrup. Got a tummy ache? Laudanum, rash, mercury ointment, nightmares? A mug of hot wine and a stern warning to dream less. There is a medicine for every problem, real, imaginary, or purely convenient for the grown-ups in the house. You pour yourself a cup of coffee and sit beside your drowsy patient. You wonder if the remedy is really for the child or if it's for you, the parent who just needs 5 quiet minutes before facing another round of laundry, wood chopping, and neighbourhood politics. Maybe the secret to 19th century parenting wasn't resilience, but a steady hand, a thick book of receipts, and a willingness to believe a little in the power of opiates and warm water. As your child drifts towards sleep, you pat their head and tuck the mug away, feeling half witch, half mad scientist. There is a certain pride in knowing you're prepared for anything, from bellyaches to existential crises, armed with nothing but a shelf of tinctures and blind optimism. You promise yourself you'll try prunes next time. Maybe, probably not, probably. For now, you savour the rare silence, the smell of laudanum hanging in the air, and the knowledge that, at least until lunchtime, you've survived another round of Victorian childcare. It's flu season. Again. Your child is hacking up a lung, and instead of calling the doctor, you reach for a syrup that lists opiate extract as its main ingredient. Directions. Administer until silence falls. Side effects may include silence falling forever. You sigh, because this is not your first flu season, and it will not be your last. In the 1860s, winter doesn't just arrive, it moves in, unpacks, and starts coughing on everyone you love. The house is sealed up tight to keep out the cold, which means every sniffle, wheeze, and suspicious rattle is now echoing politely from wall to wall. Fresh air is considered risky. Germs are not yet a thing anyone believes in. Bad air, however, is everywhere and apparently very offended. Your child's cough has rhythm now. It's not random, it's deliberate. Loud. Strategic. The kind of cough designed to wake siblings, neighbours, and possibly the dead. You press a hand to their chest, feeling it vibrate like a poorly tuned engine, and decide it's time for the syrup. This isn't a job for rest and hydration. This is a job for chemistry. You fetch the bottle from the cabinet, already familiar with its weight and reassuring slosh. The syrup is thick, dark, and glossy, like something you might drizzle over pancakes if you had completely given up on life. It smells sweet, medicinal, and faintly theatrical. You pour a spoonful, careful, but not too careful. Measuring devices are suggestions in this household, not laws. The child grimaces at the taste, then swallows. There's a pause. Another cough tries to start, thinks better of it, and quietly gives up. The transformation is impressive. The frantic, red-faced coughing gives way to a calm, distant stare. Their breathing slows, their shoulders relax. It's like watching a storm cloud politely dissolve. You settle them back into bed, tucking blankets around a body that now feels heavier, looser, and far less interested in expressing discomfort. Within minutes, they're asleep, mouth open, eyes fluttering like they've just remembered something very important from a previous life. Silence settles over the room, deep, profound silence, the kind that feels illegal. Down the hall, another child starts sniffling. You freeze. You know that sound. It's the opening act. You consider pretending you didn't hear it, but parenting in the 1860s has taught you one thing. If you ignore a symptom, it multiplies. Soon enough, you're back at the cabinet dispensing cough syrup like a bartender during last call. The logic is simple. The water is cold, the roads are bad, the doctor is expensive and will probably suggest bleeding, mustard plasters, or a stern lecture about drafts. The syrup, on the other hand, works quickly and asks no questions. It doesn't care if the cough is from influenza, a cold, or a dramatic performance designed to get out of chores. It treats them all the same. By mid-morning, the house resembles a very polite sanatorium. Children are arranged on beds and settees, bundled in quilts, breathing slowly, dreams drifting somewhere far from mucus and misery. You tiptoe through the rooms, afraid to disturb the spell. Even the dog has adopted a respectful hush, curling up near the stove with the reverence of a chapel attendant. Of course, you know this peace comes at a price. When they wake, they'll be groggy, confused, possibly emotional about things that do not matter, like the existence of spoons, but that's later. Right now, you have a quiet house, a moment to sit, and a rare chance to drink your coffee while it's still warm. You glance again at the syrup bottle, its promises bold and unquestioned. In another century, people might look back on this with concern. They might ask how anyone thought this was a good idea. But standing here, surrounded by sleeping children and blessed silence, you understand exactly why it happened. In the 1860s, survival isn't about perfect choices. It's about getting through the season. And if that means turning coughs into naps with a spoonful of opiate-laced syrup, then so be it. Winter is long, silence is rare, and for now at least everyone is breathing, quietly. Doctors are expensive and their advice is mostly rest and fluids. Luckily, the local apothecary sells infant pacifiers in liquid form. You start to wonder if the real medical innovation of the 1860s is simply letting parents sleep through the night. It's a running joke among parents on your street. If you can afford to call the doctor, you're either dying, rich, or both. The doctor, when he does arrive, is a figure straight out of a daguerreotype. Long coat, black bag, and an expression of grim sympathy. He pokes, prods, and inevitably offers the same conclusion, delivered with the confidence of someone who's just discovered the secret of life. Keep the child warm, give them plenty of fluids, and let nature take its course. His fee, however, is as real as a slap with a wet sock. You recall the last house call, how you spent all morning tidying the parlour and boiling the good handkerchiefs just in case. The doctor entered, examined your feverish, howling child, and within 3 minutes had prescribed exactly what you were already doing. He did, however, scrawl something unintelligible on a slip of paper, which the apothecary accepted with a knowing wink and promptly exchanged for a bottle of soothing drops. You paid your bill, watched the doctor's carriage vanish, and wondered if the true cure was simply being able to say, "The doctor has been, and he agrees with me." That's why, when illness strikes, your first stop is the apothecary's shop. The place is a sensory overload, shelves crowded with bottles and boxes, the air tinged with menthol and suspicion, a bell over the door that rings with a note of promise and warning. The apothecary himself is equal parts pharmacist, bartender, and amateur therapist. He's always ready with advice, usually unsolicited, occasionally useful, and a dazzling array of pacifiers for infants, children, and even the occasional adult in need of a nap. Today's special, a cordial described as the gentlest remedy for fretful youth. You squint at the label, scanning for familiar words. Instead, you find a list of ingredients that reads like a lost recipe from a pirate's logbook. Poppy syrup, paregoric, wild lettuce, essence of moonbeam. Directions: administer at bedtime or whenever peace and quiet are desperately needed. Side effects: not to be used if operating heavy farm equipment. You return home, clutching the bottle like a prize. Your spouse meets you at the door, hopeful. "Did you get the strong stuff?" they whisper, eyeing the label with a mixture of reverence and fear. The children, for their part, are engaged in a screaming contest that would terrify the bravest battlefield nurse. You don't hesitate. A measured spoonful for the worst offender, a half dose for the runner-up, and a stern look for the child who insists they're actually feeling fine. Within the hour, the house is transformed. Quarrels fade to mutters. Eyes grow heavy. By bedtime, you and your spouse sit together in stunned silence, marvelling at your sudden competence as parents. You wonder aloud if the true purpose of all these patent medicines isn't curing disease, but restoring sanity. Outside, the world stumbles on. Lanterns flicker, dogs bark, the neighbour's baby howls with a ferocity that shakes the rafters. You hear the distant clatter of a doctor's carriage and thank your stars you won't need his services tonight. Not when the apothecary has turned science, commerce, and a dash of wishful thinking into a solution for nearly every crisis. You watch your children sleep peaceful, at last, faces smooth and quiet in the glow of the oil lamp. Maybe you'll write the apothecary a thank you note. Or maybe you'll just stop by tomorrow, ask for another bottle, and let the real magic of the 1860s continue, surviving parenthood one spoonful at a time. You pack your child off to the one-room schoolhouse, lunch pail in one hand, a vial of God knows what in the other. The teacher winks knowingly. Half her class is floating on the same cloud of morphine-laced calm. No one learns much, but no one throws spitballs either. It's barely dawn when the house erupts into the usual preschool chaos. Boots are missing, coats are damp, and somebody's lunch bread has been pre-tasted by the dog. Through the groggy haze, you remember to slip a small glass bottle into your child's pocket. The label promises clarity, focus, and good conduct, which is 19th century code for won't stage a mutiny by noon. At the schoolhouse, children shuffle in with the same dazed resignation as parents at a 3-hour dance recital. Eyes are heavy, voices muffled, and the only real energy in the room comes from the teacher's efforts to keep the pot-bellied stove burning, and her own patience from running out. The desks are lined up like pews in a church of perpetual drowsiness. There are no cell phones, no fidget spinners, no ADHD diagnoses, just the slow, warm drip of poppy syrup coursing through the veins of every would-be troublemaker. You pause for a moment outside the door, eavesdropping on the morning routine. Hands up if you had your tonic today, the teacher chirps. Most hands rise, some slow, some suspiciously enthusiastic. There's a subtle camaraderie among the parents as well, a shared unspoken understanding that dosing your kid before class isn't laziness, it's survival. You nod to Mrs. Abbott, who admits she doubles up on Mondays. Mr. Colby swears he waters down the dose for spelling tests, just to keep things lively. As lessons begin, the effect is undeniable. No one's fighting, no one's shouting. The only mischief comes from the class mouse, who has somehow evaded sedation and is making a bid for the chalk tray. Arithmetic is a group effort, spelling bees are a contest of who can stay awake the longest, and penmanship exercises become an avant-garde performance in wobbly cursive. The teacher, no stranger to the art of medicinal management, keeps a discreet stash of classroom pacifiers on her desk, just in case someone's morning dose begins to wear off by geography. Your child's eyes glaze over as the teacher drones on about the Oregon Trail. He's physically present, mentally wandering the sleepy hills of syrup-induced serenity. Every so often, he startles to life, as if remembering he's supposed to be learning, then promptly forgets, and returns to drawing abstract circles in his copybook. There is something oddly peaceful about a classroom where the biggest disruption is a collective nap during the recitation of times tables. Lunchtime arrives, and you wonder if the meal will revive them. But cold pork, pickled apple, and a slice of last week's bread offer little excitement. Some children sneak an extra sip of calming cordial with dessert. Others trade bites for a taste of something stronger from the back row. Nobody runs on the playground lest they risk sweating out their morning dose and suddenly caring about dodgeball. By the end of the day, the teacher has covered reading, arithmetic, moral tales, and the fine art of managing a room full of glassy-eyed children. Parents collect their little scholars, each one slightly more wrinkled and less energetic than they were at sunrise. You exchange knowing glances with the other grown-ups. Sure, nobody memorized the state capitals, but at least nobody tried to ride the schoolhouse goat through the window. As you walk home, your child holding your hand and blinking in the golden afternoon light, you reflect on the subtle genius of 1860s education. It's not about grades or progress. It's about making it through the day, calm, mostly quiet, and, if you're lucky, still awake. Someone falls out of a tree. Someone else gets kicked by a horse. It's fine. The answer is always apply this plaster, give them a dropper of this tincture, and see if they wake up by dinner time. That's the schoolyard in the 1860s, a lawless arena of splinters, bruises, and Darwinian selection, lightly supervised by adults who consider broken bones a sign of healthy play. You stand on the porch, surveying the after-school chaos, which today looks like a cross between a barn raising and a Civil War field hospital. There's always one child bleeding, one child limping, and at least one insisting that it doesn't hurt actually, even as they pick gravel out of their knee with the stoicism of a war hero. You have a system. First, a brisk inspection. How many limbs still bend the right way? How many teeth are counted for? Has anyone developed a sudden suspicious cough to avoid chores? Next, you open the family first aid kit. A tin box rattling with glass bottles and sticky rolled bandages. The smell alone could knock out a bull. The star of the show, the opium plaster, advertised as nature's gentle embrace for aches, breaks, and minor catastrophic injuries. It's a sticky strip infused with enough narcotic to sedate a mule. The application process is straightforward. Slap it on the sore spot, say a little prayer, and hope nobody licks it. There's also a selection of liniments for bruises, wintergreen and camphor, and for really spectacular falls, a dropper of children's soothing elixir, which upon closer inspection is mostly opium, peppermint oil, and optimism. Your child, let's say it's Billy today, hobbles over, clutching his elbow and recounting the details of his accidental descent from the apple tree. He's a little pale, but otherwise proud of his story. You clean the scrape with water from the well, douse it in whatever antiseptic you have on hand, whiskey if there's any left, and stick on the famous plaster. For good measure, you administer a drop or two of the tincture, just until his eyes stop watering and start glazing. He's fine. He might even thank you, or he might simply fall asleep on the woodpile. Meanwhile, little Sally has been kicked squarely by the neighbour's horse, a rite of passage in these parts. There's a hoof-shaped bruise forming on her thigh, and a wild tale involving a dare, a carrot, and proving bravery. You check her over, apply a liniment that burns just enough to distract from the actual injury, and tell her she can skip chores if she doesn't faint. To everyone's surprise, she sits up, declares herself cured, and runs off to climb something else she shouldn't. It's a system rooted in trust. Trust in the bottle, trust in the plaster, trust that no injury is so dire it can't be soothed by a homemade poultice and the promise of dessert. There's no X-ray machine, no trip to urgent care. Just the ritual of fixing, dosing, and monitoring for results, which usually means the child either rallies or naps through dinner. Of course, you're not naive. You keep an ear out for anything that sounds like serious trouble, wheezing, fever, or the phrase "I can see the bone." Those get the special treatment, a visit to the doctor if you can afford it, or a quick consultation with the neighbour who used to be a nurse, sort of. But for everything else, you rely on time, tincture, and a high pain threshold developed over generations. By dusk, the children are accounted for, patched up, and only mildly woozy. You count it as a win. They might not remember the details, but you will. The wild stories, the makeshift cures, and the quiet victory of surviving another day in a world where playground accidents are just another excuse to break out the opium and hope for the best. Bedtime means more than just tucking in. It means debating which bottle will send everyone into the gentlest coma, the cherry-flavoured syrup or the bottle that smells like expired gin. Either way, you're promised dreamless slumber. Fingers crossed. You survey the evening scene, children milling about in various states of filth and exhaustion, hair wild, eyes wide, pyjamas hanging from their limbs like surrender flags. It's been a day of bruises, spills, and the sort of squabbles that only siblings can escalate from 0 to somebody's crying in under 3 seconds. The sun has barely set, but you can sense the looming storm of bedtime resistance gathering force. You know what's coming. The routine is almost sacred. First, a round of last-minute water requests, then the parade of mysterious ailments. My foot itches. I think I have a fever. What if my pillow is haunted? Each complaint delivered with escalating drama is a prelude to the real battle. The war against night terrors and the nightmares that stalk the hallways of every 1860s childhood. You pull out your arsenal. On one side of the table, a bottle labelled Cherry Nocturne, sweet, syrupy, and almost certainly more alcohol than fruit. On the other, an ancient, dust-coated jug of Gentleman's Nightcap, its label promising peaceful dreams but reeking of something that once spent a summer fermenting in a boot. Both are staples of the Victorian sleep ritual, the liquid cousins of a lullaby and a weighted blanket combined. The children gather around, assessing the options with the practiced suspicion of tiny chemists. The bravest request, a full spoon of cherry syrup for the flavour, they say, but you know it's for the promise of dreamless sleep and the mild thrill of tasting forbidden medicine. The more cautious opt for the nightcap, their faces scrunching in anticipation of the flavour, followed by the telltale loosening of muscles and eyelids. There's a brief debate. Will the syrup ward off the monsters under the bed, or does the nightcap work better against the shadow that lurks in the wardrobe? You recall your own childhood fears and wonder if anything short of a fire-breathing cat would have kept the nightmares away. Still, the bottles are tried and true. The labels offer comfort for fretful children, nervous complaints, and general unruliness. There's no mention of actual ingredients or proper dosing, but in the 1860s, reassurance counts for more than science. With the medicines dispensed and the children safely tucked under threadbare quilts, the house finally quiets. You sit in the hallway, listening as anxious whispers fade into slow, rhythmic breathing. It's a victory of sorts. You manage to tuck away the terrors for another night, at least until someone wakes up convinced they've been chased by a spectral goose, or haunted by the ghost of unfinished homework. You tiptoe from room to room, adjusting blankets, checking pulses with the gentle paranoia of a parent who has read one too many cautionary tales. The air is heavy with the scent of cherry, ethanol, and a hint of desperation. Every so often a child mutters in their sleep, eyes darting behind closed lids, but the bottles work their magic. Soon, even the family dog is snoring. As you finally settle into your own creaky bed, you reflect on the absurd genius of 19th century parenting. If the monsters are too persistent, there's always a backup bottle on the nightstand just in case. No fancy gadgets, no meditation apps, just hope in a glass bottle and the unspoken agreement that tomorrow's nightmares can wait until morning. You close your eyes, grateful for the silence, and wonder how many generations of parents have relied on the same rituals. For now, you drift into your own sleep, thankful for dreamless nights, and for the fact that nobody ever asked what was actually in that syrup. You invite the neighbours over to commiserate about your children's teeth. There's cake, there's coffee, and there's a tray of soothing syrups. Everyone exchanges tips about which one works fastest and which one is least likely to make your kids see imaginary rabbits. The gathering begins mid-morning, when the babies are at their loudest and the adults are running purely on caffeine and resignation. Chairs are dragged into the parlour, children are deposited on quilts like damp sacks of flour, and the air fills with the overlapping sounds of polite conversation and low-grade infant despair. Someone's baby is chewing on a table leg. Someone else's is gnawing furiously on a cold spoon. All of them are red-faced, drooling, and deeply offended by the concept of teeth. This isn't a party in the modern sense. There are no decorations, no music, no expectations of joy. It's a support group with frosting. The cake is dry but serviceable. The coffee is strong enough to wake the dead, which is fortunate because half the adults look like they narrowly escaped becoming historical footnotes sometime around dawn. Then come the syrups. They're arranged neatly on a tray like fine wines at a tasting. Amber bottles, dark bottles, bottles with cheerful babies smiling on the label as if they've never known pain. Mrs. Carter swears by the cherry one, says it works in minutes. Mrs. Holloway prefers the clear cordial because it doesn't linger in the dreams. Someone mentions a brand that made their child sleep through an entire thunderstorm, which is met with gasps and reverent nods. You pass around spoons, carefully wiping them between uses, mostly out of habit rather than medical reasoning. Each parent administers a dose with the confidence of long practice. A dab here, a half spoon there. No one is measuring exactly. Precision is for people with time and nerves left intact. Within minutes, the transformation begins. The baby's cries soften, their limbs relax, tiny fists unclench. One by one, they slump against their parents like overcooked noodles. A hush settles over the room, broken only by the sound of adults exhaling for the first time all day. Conversation shifts. Now that no one is actively screaming, people can talk like humans again. You trade stories. Who teethed early, who teethed late, who bit a sibling out of spite. Someone recalls their mother rubbing gums with rum and calls it barbaric, while simultaneously reaching for a syrup that contains something far stronger. There's a strange comfort in the shared experience. Everyone here is exhausted. Everyone is winging it. No one really knows what they're doing, but the syrup works, and that's enough. You laugh about the imaginary rabbit's comment, though at least 3 people quietly admit they've seen a child stare into the corner of a room and giggle at nothing for a solid hour. Across the room, the older children are playing quietly, their usual chaos dialed down to a manageable hum. One is stacking blocks with intense concentration. Another is lying on the rug, contemplating the ceiling as if it holds the secrets of the universe. No one is fighting. No one is crying. It's the most successful social gathering you've hosted all year. Someone raises a coffee cup in a mock toast. To modern medicine, they say, which earns a few tired laughs. You glance at the tray of bottles and think about how future generations might judge this moment. You imagine them clutching pearls, shaking heads, wondering how anyone thought this was acceptable. But standing here, surrounded by quiet children and calm adults, you understand exactly why it happened. Parenting in the 1860s isn't about ideals. It's about survival. It's about getting through the day, the week, the long stretch of teething misery without losing your mind or your voice. As the party winds down, coats are gathered, babies are lifted with care, and everyone leaves with a bottle recommendation and a promise to return the favour next time another tooth threatens the peace. You close the door behind the last guest, survey the quiet room, and allow yourself a small, tired smile. For today the teeth are quieter, the children are calm, and thanks to a little syrup and shared understanding, so are you. The baby is burning up. You try cold compresses, then a tincture from a travelling salesman. There's a brief discussion about bleeding, but someone remembers soothing syrup is on sale this week. Modern problems require morphine solutions. There's a certain panic that comes with a feverish child in the 1860s, a dread that seeps into the wallpaper that lingers in every hurried step across creaking floorboards. The baby's cheeks are flushed red, her eyes watery and unfocused, little fists clenching the bedsheet in restless discomfort. You stand over her crib armed with wet cloths and whispered reassurances, hoping that if you just lower the temperature a degree, everything will be fine. But the heat won't budge, and every cough sounds like a warning bell. The neighbours, of course, have opinions. Mr. Hargrove, who has never raised a child past toddlerhood, recommends wrapping the baby in vinegar-soaked rags. Mrs. Townsend brings over a sprig of dried lavender and a boiled potato, which you're supposed to place under the mattress for balance. Your own mother sends word to bleed the child a little. It draws out the poison. You look at your spouse, both of you silently grateful for the thin excuse to ignore tradition, and put your faith in a more modern miracle. Enter the travelling salesman, a man with a moustache, a battered suitcase, and the confidence of someone who has never cared for a sick child. He sweeps into town on a cloud of grand promises, hawking glass bottles of miracle cure with labels that shimmer with hope and hazard. Guaranteed to calm the nerves, purify the blood, and restore peaceful sleep, he cries, handing over a tincture that smells suspiciously like turpentine and licorice. Desperation makes you generous. You measure out a dose, mix it with a little water, and offer it to the baby, who glares at you with the suspicion of a child who has seen too much. The result? A momentary pause, then a spectacular grimace, but the fever stays stubborn and bright, as if mocking your efforts. That's when someone, blessed pragmatic Aunt May, remembers the sale at the apothecary. Soothing syrup, 2 bottles for a nickel, puts the little ones right to sleep, she says, with the confidence of a woman who's never lost a wink to conscience. The phrase modern problems require morphine solutions has never felt so literal. The syrup's label is a study in marketing. Cherubs cradling infants, promises of dreamless slumber and gentle relief. It does not mention what happens after 3 nights in a row, or how the line between medicine and quiet gets blurry in the lonely hours before dawn. You check the directions, administer by the teaspoon as needed until child is calm. The definition of calm is, conveniently, up to you. You take a breath, fill the spoon, and watch as the syrup slides into the baby's mouth. Within minutes, her breathing slows. The fever breaks a little, or seems to, or maybe you just want to believe it does. The house falls quiet. The dog sighs. Your spouse places a gentle hand on your shoulder, both of you relieved, guilty, and above all utterly exhausted. You linger by the crib, watching for any sign of distress, for the nightmare side of the miracle. You know stories of children who sleep so deeply they scare their parents, of fevers that fade but never quite let go, of dreams too strange to describe. Yet tonight, you choose hope. The baby's eyelids flutter, her fists unclench, and for the first time in hours she rests. In the glow of the oil lamp, you and your spouse share a quiet, wary gratitude. Parenting is a long series of choices, each one weighed against fear, fatigue, and the best intentions you can muster. For now, the fever is gone, the baby sleeps, and you tell yourself that just maybe you did the right thing, at least until the next medical nightmare arrives with the dawn. A wagon pulls into town, painted with promises and possibly lead-based paint. There's a man on a box shouting about his miracle elixir. For just a nickel, your child can experience the joy of pharmaceutical innovation, whether they want to or not. The air in town crackles with excitement as the wagon lumbers to a halt beside the general store. Children gather first, drawn by the bright colours and wild claims. The side of the wagon reads Dr. Marvel's Universal Remedy. cures all ills guaranteed. There are swirls, gold leaf, and a suspiciously healthy-looking horse tied at the back. The driver leaps down, tipping his battered top hat and launching into a speech that could wake the dead, or at least a roomful of parents desperately hoping for a good night's sleep. Dr. Marvel, if that is indeed his real name, has a voice like thunder and a flair for the dramatic. Are you troubled by headaches, fevers, fretful babies, cranky husbands, or a touch of the vapours, he bellows. Look no further. One drop of my miracle elixir, and all your troubles will vanish faster than your paycheck on market day. The crowd laughs, but their eyes are hungry, searching for hope in a bottle. The mothers inch closer, clutching sticky children. The fathers pretend not to listen, but soon find themselves standing in the front row. The show is a spectacle. Dr. Marvel invites a volunteer, a child with a mysterious rash, or an old-timer who claims to have not slept in a week. A bottle is produced, uncorked, and the aroma, equal parts licorice, boot polish, and broken dreams, wafts over the crowd. A spoonful for you, my good man. The volunteer drinks, makes a face, and with a theatrical flourish pronounces himself instantly cured. Applause erupts, coins change hands, and soon bottles are selling faster than pies at the county fair. Your own children plead for a taste. Just a sip, please, they beg, eyes wide, imagining adventure rather than adverse reactions. You hesitate, but the crowd is moving, the excitement contagious, and Dr. Marvel assures you his elixir is as gentle as a mother's touch and as powerful as a thunderstorm. With a resigned sigh, and let's be honest, a flicker of hope, you part with a nickel and claim your bottle. At home, the elixir is added to the family's collection, nestled among cough syrups, soothing drops, and liniments of questionable origin. The children clamour for a taste after dinner, and you oblige, measuring out the prescribed amount. The flavour is unforgettable. Eyes water, noses wrinkle, and a hush falls as everyone waits for something miraculous to happen. Within minutes the children grow calm, docile, and oddly philosophical. One stares at the wallpaper, lost in contemplation. Another declares a sudden appreciation for string beans. You're amazed and slightly unnerved by the effectiveness. For the rest of the evening not a single argument erupts. The house feels like it's been enchanted, a spell cast by a travelling showman and a few drops of dubious chemistry. The next day tales ripple through town. Did you try Dr. Marvel's elixir? I slept like a log. My lumbago hasn't acted up since. There are a few strange reports. A child who recited poetry in Latin, a neighbour who dreamed he was a chicken, but these are chalked up to the wonder of a modern medicine. As the wagon leaves, bottles rattling in the back, you catch yourself wishing you'd bought a spare, or perhaps a dozen. But you know, deep down, that the effects are temporary and the magic fleeting. The medicine show moves on, chasing the next town's dreams and dollars. You watch the road grow quiet and tuck your bottle away, grateful for the strange, brief peace. In the world of 1860s parenting, a miracle elixir, however mysterious, is sometimes the best show in town, and for a nickel, even the side effects seem like part of the act. It's Sunday, and everyone's expected to sit still in church for 3 hours. You pre-game with a drop or two of something calming. The pastor is passionate, the children are silent, and you silently thank the chemists of the world. Sunday mornings are supposed to be about peace, reflection, and spiritual renewal. In the 1860s, however, they are more about advanced logistics and pharmaceutical intervention. The process starts early. You wrestle small children into their only good clothes, stiff collars, itchy stockings, shoes that fit no one, and bonnets engineered to strangle the will to live. Each child gets a dab of pomade or a spit polish behind the ears, followed by the stern lecture. Today, we behave. The stakes are high. The church pews are wooden, unforgiving, and positioned just far enough from the pulpit to guarantee maximum boredom and minimum fidgeting. The congregation is a living tableau of scrutiny. Neighbours, in-laws, rivals, and that one deacon who remembers every sermon you ever nodded off during. There's no nursery, no cry room, just you and your brood, sandwiched between the hymnals and a stern sense of public shame. That's why, before heading out, you line up the children like nervous actors backstage and administer a measured dose of Sunday drops. The bottle is labelled for nerves, restlessness, and childish irreverence, a genteel way of saying won't start a fistfight in the choir loft. The syrup is sweet and thick with a medicinal aftertaste that reminds you not to overdo it. if you want anyone to stay awake long enough for the closing hymn. You herd everyone out the door, down the muddy lane and into the chill of the church vestibule. The service begins and you settle into your pew, acutely aware of every eye upon you. The children, usually kinetic disasters, now sit in angelic silence, blinking up at the pulpit with the placid focus of well-fed cows. You know it's only temporary, but you savour it while it lasts. The pastor thunders from the pulpit, channeling fire and brimstone with the stamina of a man who's never wrangled toddlers. The sermon meanders from sin to salvation to the perils of modern excess. You nod along, careful not to look too approving at the mention of newfangled medicines. The children, blissfully unaware of doctrinal nuance, stare glassily ahead, or drift into light naps, heads bobbing gently like buoys in a calm sea. Every so often, another child in a neighbouring pew erupts in a fit of giggles or tears, only to be swiftly silenced by a discreet spoonful from a mother's purse. There's a subtle solidarity among parents, a glance here, a raised eyebrow there, a knowing smile that says, yes, we all know, and yes, we're all doing it. The church air is thick with incense, perfume, and the faint, sweet note of camphor and morphine. During the hymns, your youngest manages a dreamy sway, singing along a beat behind everyone else. The oldest turns the pages of the prayer book with uncharacteristic care, as if every psalm is a delicate artifact. No one picks a fight. No one ties a sibling's bonnet to the pew. For once, your family's reputation as the loud ones is momentarily suspended. When the final blessing is pronounced and the doors open to let in the chilly daylight, you gather your children, upright and drowsy, and exchange quiet nods with other parents. The pastor shakes your hand, eyes scanning your cherubic crew with something like suspicion or admiration. Well behaved this week, he says. You smile and mutter a humble thanks, careful not to let your relief show too brightly. The walk home is peaceful. The children's energy returns in slow increments as the syrup wears off. By the time you reach your gate, the usual sibling rivalries are warming up for an encore. But for 3 hours, you experience the miracle of pharmaceutical tranquility, and that, in the harsh and holy world of 1860s parenting, is reason enough to give thanks. The children are fighting. Again. Instead of threatening to turn this carriage around, you hand out teaspoons of quieting cordial. The bickering fades into a dull hum, as everyone slips into a mellow, if slightly glassy-eyed peace. This is not your first skirmish of the day, and it certainly won't be your last. The fight began, as they all do, over something impossibly small. A chair, a look, the vague accusation that someone touched my air. Voices rise, accusations fly. One child is already crying, not because they're hurt, but because crying feels like a strong opening move. You intervene with the weary efficiency of someone who has done this dance since sunrise. First, the stern voice, then the counting, then the promise of consequences so vague they barely register. None of it works. The noise escalates until it feels like the walls themselves are preparing to file a complaint. That's when you reach for the bottle. The quieting cordial lives on a high shelf, out of reach of small hands but never out of mind. Its label is tastefully understated, promising harmony, calmness, and domestic tranquility. There are cherubs on the bottle, cherubs who have clearly never shared a bedroom. You pour carefully, because even in the 1860s you understand there's a fine line between peaceful afternoon and why won't anyone wake up. You dole out the doses like a seasoned diplomat, a full spoon for the ringleader, half a spoon for the instigator, a sympathetic sip for the one who was technically innocent but absolutely about to join in. They protest the taste at first, bitter, sweet, medicinal, but the protests lack conviction. They've learned the pattern. They know what comes next. And sure enough, within minutes the sharp edges soften. Voices lower, shoulders drop. The child who was threatening to disown the family now finds the patterned rug deeply fascinating. Another sits quietly, tracing circles on the table with one finger, lost in a thought that might be about nothing at all. You watch the transformation with something between relief and awe. This is the true miracle of 19th century parenting. Not that children survived, but that parents did. There are no parenting books, no conflict resolution workshops, no timeouts that actually work. There is only chemistry and hope. The house grows quiet, not silent, never silent, but manageable. The children drift into separate corners, united at last by a shared disinterest in continuing the argument. One hums softly, another stares out the window with the peaceful intensity of someone contemplating clouds, or perhaps the meaning of existence. You sit down for the first time all afternoon, heart still racing slightly from the confrontation. You know this peace is temporary. You know the cordial will wear off. You know that in an hour or two someone will accuse someone else of stealing something that was never theirs to begin with. But for now, you have this moment. Outside, a neighbour's children are screaming at full volume, unmedicated and unrestrained. You feel a flicker of smug gratitude, followed immediately by guilt, followed immediately by exhaustion. Parenting is a moral obstacle course, and today you have chosen the shortcut labelled quiet. Later, when the cordial fades, the children will return to themselves, arguments reignited, alliances reshuffled, grievances remembered with perfect clarity. Someone will ask for a snack. Someone will complain that the light is too bright. Someone will insist they are bored, which is somehow your fault. But for now, the squabble is over. The house breathes. You breathe. You glance at the bottle, already planning whether to ration the remaining doses or make a discreet trip to the apothecary tomorrow. Because in the 1860s, sibling rivalry isn't solved with deep conversations or personal growth. It's solved with a spoon, a bottle, and the quiet understanding that sometimes peace isn't negotiated. It's administered. Every neighbour swears by a different plant, root, or suspicious-looking powder. It's all natural, they say. You look at the bottle. 80% alcohol, 20% opium. Technically, that is natural. So is falling off a cliff. It's an ongoing debate in the neighbourhood. What really works, what's truly safe, and what counts as natural when it comes to child-rearing in the 1860s. Mrs. Gibbs next door is a believer in elderberry syrup, home-boiled with extra sugar and optimism. Mr. Larson is partial to slippery elm bark tea, the kind that makes your child's mouth stick together for an hour, which he claims restores balance. You smile politely, clutching your own bottle of laudanum, and try not to mention that your herbal remedy could technically fuel a bonfire if left too close to the stove. The logic is always the same. Nature knows best. If it grows in a hedgerow, you should eat it, rub it on your skin, or steep it in a tea until the ailment submits out of boredom. Someone passes you a pouch of dried roots. Chew these for headaches. Another shares a small jar of what looks suspiciously like pond scum. Just dab it on the gums. If your child is still screaming after that, the answer is more pond scum or perhaps less. It's never clear. You try to keep an open mind. Maybe willow bark is the miracle you've been missing. Maybe catnip boiled into a tea really does banish the colic. You try the chamomile, the fennel, even the blessed thistle that tastes like regret and lawn clippings. For each attempt, there's an elder or neighbour who swears by it. Worked for my granddad, they insist, conveniently skipping the part where he died at 39 and had all his teeth pulled by age 16. But the era's true genius is in its ability to market anything as natural, provided you say it loudly enough. Patent medicine sellers roam the streets, hawking bottles of herbal extract that glow ominously in sunlight. They insist their cure-alls are all natural, made with ingredients from God's green earth. You turn the bottle and scan the fine print. Opium, cocaine, chloroform, sometimes a whisper of honey to keep it honest. Neighbours compare notes. This one's peppermint, good for tummies. This one's got turpentine, keeps the worms at bay. The boundary between folk wisdom and chemical experiment grows thinner with each anecdote. You begin to suspect the only thing more common than home remedies is denial. The real challenge comes when you try to explain the difference to your children. They're offered dandelion leaves for dinner, licorice root for sore throats, and a mysterious elixir of life for everything else. You watch their faces, hopeful, betrayed, resigned, as they try each new dose. Sometimes the taste alone is enough to cure whatever ailed them. Other times you both agree that maybe just this once the cherry cordial is the best way forward. There's an almost superstitious hope in every experiment. The belief that somewhere, in some root or resin, there's a magic fix that will finally let everyone sleep through the night. But as you stare at your natural remedy, liquid, brown, and flammable, you realise you're part of a tradition stretching back centuries. Desperate people, trying anything, doing their best, and hoping the cure doesn't turn out worse than the disease. So you nod as the neighbours pass around their nature's medicine, privately calculating how much laudanum is left in the cabinet. You smile, thank them for the thistle, and quietly vow to stick with what works, whether it comes from the earth, the apothecary, or the unending well of parental hope. because in the end, natural is just another word for we survived another day. And in the 1860s, that's miracle enough. Your toddler is cranky, sticky, and chewing on something that probably isn't food. Time for a quick dose of calmative drops. Within minutes, they're asleep, drooling, and blissfully unaware that their teething ring is actually a salted potato. It's a routine that's become as natural as breathing. You can spot the signs from a mile away. The sudden tantrum, the mysterious rash on their cheek, the deeply philosophical wail about nothing at all. Toddlers are tiny agents of chaos, fueled by jam, unchecked curiosity, and the unbreakable will to survive every attempt at nap time. If there is a moment of silence, it's probably suspicious. If there's laughter, you double-check for paint on the walls. The medicine cabinet is ready, stocked with an impressive array of tinctures, droppers, and bottles that look suspiciously like props from a gothic horror novel. There's the calmative drops, promised to soothe nerves, settle stomachs, and encourage peaceful sleep. The main ingredients are always a closely guarded secret, though you'd wager a week's wages that opium and sugar are involved, with a pinch of wishful thinking. When the time comes, you deploy the drops with practiced precision. The toddler protests, mouth clamped tighter than a banker's vault, but eventually relents. The dropper works its magic. Their eyelids droop, a thread of drool slips down their chin, and all thoughts of whatever mischief was planned are replaced by the gentle hum of oblivion. The salted potato, formerly a prized possession, slips quietly to the floor. You have a moment to breathe, to clean something sticky, to sit, just for a second, and enjoy a house that is, for once, not echoing with high-pitched shrieks or the sound of furniture being rearranged by someone under 3 feet tall. There's an almost magical stillness that falls over the house, the kind of peace that would inspire poetry, if you weren't so tired that you've forgotten how to spell your own name. Of course, this tranquility is temporary. Toddlers have a sixth sense for the effects of medicinal sabotage, and will rise again, stronger and possibly more determined. But for now, you savour the calm, marvelling at the wild ingenuity of 19th century childcare. The bottles all promise natural calm, and perhaps, in a sense, they deliver by any means necessary. You remember all the advice you've been given. Great Aunt Matilda insists on dill water for colic. Mrs. Peabody prefers warm milk laced with brandy, and your neighbour once tried mustard poultices just to see what would happen. Nothing works quite so reliably as the tincture. It's the Swiss Army knife of parenting. Teething, fever, random fits of rage, unexplained existential despair. One bottle to rule them all. As you check on your dozing toddler, you can't help but reflect on the absurdity of it all. Future generations will surely judge this era, imagining hordes of glassy-eyed children drifting through childhood in a morphine haze. But here, now, you do what you must. You weigh the risks, squint at the label, and measure the drops. You hope for the best. Later, the child will wake sticky as ever and resume chewing on whatever object fate has placed in their path. They will not remember their afternoon nap, nor will they question the mysterious taste lingering in their mouth. You, however, will remember every blessed moment of peace, and so the cycle continues. Mischief, meltdown, medicine, miracle. You tuck the tincture away for next time, knowing it won't be long before you need it again. In the 1860s, surviving toddlerhood, yours or theirs, is an achievement worthy of celebration. And if you occasionally bend the rules in pursuit of quiet, well, that's just good parenting. Or so the label says. Your oldest has mysterious aches in their legs. It could be growing pains, or it could be the side effect of living in the 1860s. Either way, the solution is a hot water bottle, a spoonful of syrup, and the vague hope that everyone survives until morning. You try not to show concern because the last thing a child with an overactive imagination needs is an adult looking worried. Instead, you channel your best bedside manner, equal parts confidence, feigned wisdom, and a stubborn optimism that would make a riverboat gambler proud. Ah, growing pains, you say, with the authority of someone who has read precisely one paragraph about it in the back of the family Bible. You'll be 6 inches taller by next week. The child doesn't look convinced. They clutch their knees, face pinched, seeking reassurance or perhaps simply wanting someone to take the pain away. You reach for the hot water bottle, a battered relic with a faint aroma of last year's herbal tea. Filling it is a ritual. Boiling the kettle, watching the steam rise, and trying to remember if you tightened the stopper last time or simply accepted the leaks as part of the experience. Next comes the syrup. The label claims it's ideal for restlessness, aches, and general malaise. The ingredients list is a masterwork of vagueness. Herbs, opiate extract, and a trace of virtue. The directions recommend a teaspoon before bed to calm the nerves and invite peaceful slumber. You measure out the dose, watching the thick amber liquid coat the spoon. There's a fleeting pang of guilt. You wonder, not for the first time, if the medicine soothes the child or just the parent. Maybe both. As the syrup is swallowed and the hot water bottle tucked into the blankets, a hush settles over the room. You rub your child's leg as your own parents did for you, hoping that the magic is somewhere in the gesture, if not the cure. There's a strange comfort in the ritual, reaching for something, anything, that makes you feel useful in a world where so much is beyond your control. The house is quiet now, save for the occasional groan of settling timbers or the wind scratching at the window panes. You sit on the edge of the bed, stroking hair from your child's forehead, listening to their breathing slow. The aches will probably vanish by morning, or they won't, or they'll be replaced by something else, a stubbed toe, a chipped tooth, a mysterious rash that has everyone consulting the remedies and receipts by candlelight. As a parent in the 1860s, you get used to improvising. There are no specialists, no helplines, no ask-a-nurse telegraph service. There is only you, a handful of well-meaning advice from the neighbours, and whatever you have in the medicine cabinet. Sometimes you worry you're doing more harm than good. Other times, you marvel that anyone survived childhood at all. You think of all the things parents do to quiet their own fears, the stories, the remedies, the whispered promises of better by morning. You wonder if the guilt is just part of the job, an invisible side effect that doesn't come with a dosage chart. You try to forgive yourself for not having answers, for relying on old wives' tales and newfangled syrups, for hoping that sleep really can heal anything. You linger for a moment, tucking the blankets just a little tighter, willing your care to travel through the threadbare fabric and into their aching bones. You whisper something soft, part lullaby, part apology. And as the syrup works its quiet magic, you realise you've done what parents have always done. Tried, hoped, and loved the best you could. By morning your child will stretch, yawn, and dash off to the next adventure, the pain a distant memory. You, meanwhile, will refill the hot water bottle, restock the syrup, and prepare for whatever growing pains, real or imagined, come next. Because in the end, the remedy for parental guilt is the same as for the aches. A little comfort, a little hope, and the knowledge that you're not alone. The neighbour's child slept for 2 days straight. Someone else saw pink elephants. You begin to question if the real miracle of the 19th century is that anyone made it to adulthood at all. There's a certain mythology to home remedies in the 1860s. Every family has a tale, half cautionary, half badge of honour, about the time little Timmy was cured of croup but woke up speaking fluent French, or when Grandma's herbal tonic turned the neighbour's hair green for a week. The boundary between medical treatment and amateur alchemy is astonishingly thin. Instructions are vague, doses approximate, and side effects often discovered the hard way. Take the case of Mrs. Callahan's famous sleep syrup. It's said to work wonders for teething babies and overtired parents alike. One dose and the whole house falls blissfully silent. The downside? The last child who tried it missed 2 breakfasts, 1 lunch, and half a spelling lesson. When she finally woke, she was convinced it was Christmas and demanded plum pudding at sunset. Rumours swirl like autumn leaves. There's the story of the peddler's miracle bitters that cured young Billy's cough, at the expense of turning his tongue black and giving him hiccups that lasted until Easter. Another child, victim of a particularly overzealous mustard poultice, sported a red chest for days and acquired a lifelong hatred of sandwiches. Sometimes the consequences are less humorous. Old-timers shake their heads over tales of blue babies, the result of 1 too many sips from the bottle labelled calmative drops. The line between soothed and sedated is thin, and sometimes crossed at the hands of a sleep-deprived parent desperate for an hour's peace. He'll be fine, the grown-ups say, watching for the reassuring rise and fall of tiny chests in the moonlight. Even natural remedies are a gamble. That wild root for fever might actually be wild parsnip, which as it turns out is better suited for poisoning dinner guests than treating a sore throat. Pennyroyal tea is recommended by every herbalist in town, but only if you enjoy headaches and the taste of regret. The phrase just a dab becomes a prayer, a warning, and occasionally the start of a truly unforgettable family story. You begin to see why people in this era are so superstitious, so quick to knock on wood, toss salt over their shoulder, or cross the street to avoid the house with a perpetually coughing cat. Survival sometimes seems less about health and more about luck, being just cautious enough, or just far enough down the dosing line to avoid the worst of the unintended consequences. Stories spread at lightning speed, relayed across fences and during church potlucks. Did you hear about the Peterson boy? Cured his rash, but now he's afraid of spoons. Little Annie took the syrup and started reciting Latin. They're not sure she ever learned Latin. Laughter covers the worry, but every parent is keeping tally in their head. And yet, somehow, the world keeps spinning. Children bounce back from mysterious slumbers, parents compare notes, and the next illness finds everyone a little wiser, at least until the next peddler passes through town with a new elixir, promising relief without a hint of pink elephants or forgotten holidays. In the quiet after the storm, you check on your own child, breathing, dreaming, mercifully unaccompanied by technicolor hallucinations. You resolve, for the 100th time, to read the label more carefully next time, to use the measuring spoon instead of guessing, to maybe skip the mustard plaster just once. But as you tuck your child into bed, you understand the truth. The real miracle isn't just survival, but adaptation. It's learning from mistakes, laughing about the disasters, and trusting that somehow the next remedy will be just a little bit better, or at least less likely to turn anyone's hair green. It's not just the kids. Parents use the same medicines for nerves, headaches, and the existential dread of living before Netflix. Family bonding has never been so drowsy. The bottle of laudanum sitting on the higher shelf is not just for teething babies or feverish toddlers. It's a universal solution, a panacea that promises to soothe every affliction, from the nagging pain of a sprained wrist to the sharper, less tangible aches that come from wondering how you'll stretch the bacon through Friday. It's labelled for relief of ailments both bodily and nervous, which is polite Victorian code for parenthood itself. Evening falls, and the house finally settles. The children, medicated into quiet compliance, are sprawled across mattresses, looking like a gallery of little angels, if angels wore mismatched socks and snored like farm animals. You lean against the cold kitchen counter, staring out the window at the dark, silent street. Your back aches, your head throbs. You wonder, not for the first time, if it's possible to pull a muscle just by worrying. Your spouse joins you, moving with the slow deliberation of someone who has learned to savour the rare moments of peace. You exchange that look, the one that says, "We made it through another day," mingled with a silent plea for an easier tomorrow. There is a pot of tea brewing, but there is also that bottle glinting in the lamplight. The choice is obvious. You each take a teaspoon, maybe two if it's been a particularly harrowing day, and what day hasn't been lately? The taste is familiar, sweet, bitter, herbal, with a gentle burn that settles in your chest. For a moment, you feel guilty. Then you remember the preacher's wife, who always smells faintly of camphor and gin, and you forgive yourself. There is a reason every adult you know swears by some version of the same medicine. The pressures are constant. Too much work, too little money, children growing out of shoes and into trouble before you can blink. Sometimes you think the restorative tonic is less about restoring health, and more about restoring the will to go upstairs and face another bedtime negotiation. Your friends admit to the same habits, in low voices over the fence or behind cupped hands at church socials. I have a little cordial before bed just to take the edge off. A drop in my tea, and suddenly the baby's cries aren't so sharp. The line between medical advice and emotional survival is blurry at best. You remember the last doctor's visit. He listened to your complaints with practiced sympathy and handed you a small bottle. "Just a little when the nerves fray," he said, "or if the world feels too heavy." You nodded, grateful for the solution, even if you suspected he gave the same advice to every parent in town. In these moments, you realize how little separates you from your children. You all face the same relentless uncertainties, aches, fears, worries you can't quite name. The medicine helps, or at least it lets you pretend you're helping. You can breathe a little easier. You can laugh at your own anxieties, if only for an hour. You finish your tea, drowsy warmth spreading through your limbs. Your spouse leans against your shoulder, both of you lulled by the heady mixture of quiet, exhaustion, and just enough opiate to dull the day's sharper edges. Upstairs, a child whimpers in their sleep, but you know they'll settle soon. Tomorrow will bring new headaches, new squabbles, new uncertainties. But tonight, You share a moment of rare, peaceful solidarity, parents, survivors, and for a little while, simply two people sitting side by side in the gentle fog of Victorian self-care. Family bonding in the age before streaming was sometimes just a matter of sharing the same spoon and the same blurry, blissful dreams. You try to get comfortable in bed, but there's a lingering worry. Did you give too much? Too little? Will you wake up to the sound of children playing or absolute silence? Parenting is hard, but parenting with morphine is a special kind of anxiety. The house is finally quiet, almost suspiciously so, the usual symphony of creaking floorboards, muffled giggles and sibling negotiations has been replaced by a deep, syrupy silence. You lie in the dark, listening. Is that a child snoring or just the wind against the shutters? Was that a cough or just the last echo of your own conscience pacing back and forth across your tired mind? It's an anxiety that feels both new and ancient. The 1860s promise an end to sleepless nights, to endless crying, to the relentless parade of midnight maladies. All you need is a bottle, a steady hand, and enough faith in chemistry to hand over a teaspoon or two whenever desperation outweighs hesitation. But as you stare up at the ceiling, you can't help but replay the evening in your mind, every dose, every sigh of relief, every worry that perhaps just this once you should have chosen a lullaby over laudanum. Your spouse turns in bed, exhaling a sigh so heavy you can almost feel it tug at the blankets. "Are you sure you measured right?" they whisper. You nod, at least you think you do. "They'll be fine," you murmur back, your words more for yourself than for anyone else. But the questions keep circling, like moths to a lantern. Did you mix up the bottles? Was that the children's syrup? Or did you accidentally reach for the nightcap that's meant for grown-up nerves? Is anyone going to wake up at all? Or will you spend the next hour tiptoeing from bed to bed, checking pulses, brushing hair from feverish foreheads, and hoping for the reassuring sound of soft, regular breathing? This is the hidden burden of 19th century parenting, the strange, gnawing guilt of having so much power in a single spoon. You envy those future parents you sometimes imagine, with their blinking monitors and endless Google searches, their paediatricians on call and medicine measured to the milligram. But you also pity them, just a little, for never knowing the thrill of uncertainty, the way your heart can leap at the sound of a child's cough, or fall at the silence that follows. You try to relax, to count your blessings, to remind yourself that most children survive both childhood and their parents' best intentions. After all, your own mother handed out the same syrup, and her mother before her, each generation perfecting the delicate art of dosing just enough to ensure a peaceful night, but not so much as to warrant a call from the doctor. You close your eyes and picture the shelf above the stove, lined with bottles and memories, each one a silent testament to 1,000 bedtime calculations. Still, sleep is slow to come. Every time you drift, a fresh wave of doubt pulls you back. Did you remember to lock the medicine cabinet? What if one of the children wakes thirsty and goes exploring? What if, in your own exhausted haze, you forget where the line between cure and catastrophe lies? When morning finally creeps in, gold and gentle, you're already awake, listening for signs of life. A yawn, a shuffling foot, the unmistakable clatter of a spoon in a cereal bowl. Relief washes over you in warm, grateful waves. The children are stirring, groggy but alive, already squabbling about who saw the rooster first. You pull yourself out of bed, ready to face the day, quietly promising to measure more carefully, worry less, and maybe, just maybe, try an extra lullaby next time. Because in the end, the only thing stronger than Victorian syrup is the hope that tomorrow's sleep will come a little easier, and tomorrow's worries will be just a little bit lighter. Pharmaceutical companies discover there's money to be made in desperation. The town is plastered with posters, guaranteed safe, no more tantrums, approved by at least one doctor probably. You start to suspect that everyone is just making it up as they go. It starts subtly, one or two colourful placards nailed to the fence outside the general store, promising instant relief for all childhood woes. Soon, every flat surface in town is crowded with advertisements for syrups, powders, cordials, and patent medicines. There are cheerful babies on every label, smiling wide with suspiciously bright eyes and cheeks that suggest either radiant health or a mild case of cherry-flavoured intoxication. The slogans are as relentless as they are vague. No more night cries, calm children, happy homes, trusted by generations, recommended by mothers. You half expect to see a sign offering a lifetime of obedience in every spoonful. If there's an ailment, there's a product to treat it, complete with endorsements from people whose names you recognise only because they also sell eggs on Sundays. You walk down Main Street and can't escape the advertisements. The apothecary's window is a parade of cure-alls: Dr. Penworthy's peaceful pectoral, Miss Honeywell's tranquilizing tonic, marvellous Moppet mixture, now with less lead. There are claims of scientific breakthroughs, which mostly consist of finding new ways to combine opium, alcohol, sugar, and the kind of hope only found in tired parents' hearts. Of course, these elixirs are all doctor-approved, though which doctor and what they actually approved is never specified. Sometimes there's a woodcut of a man in a white coat, looking solemnly wise, clutching a bottle with all the conviction of someone who's never met your children. You know deep down that it's probably just the apothecary's cousin from 3 towns over, but the aura of expertise is impossible to resist. Word spreads fast. The neighbour's toddler slept for 10 hours after 1 spoonful of sweet slumber solution. The teacher down the street swears by Professor Calm's infusion for keeping her classroom in line. Even the pastor makes a quiet joke from the pulpit about heavenly helpers and the unexpected peace they bring to Sunday school. The competition grows fierce. Travelling salesmen arrive with suitcases full of hope, boasting testimonials from places you've never heard of. My Johnny never screamed again after just 1 dose, cured my daughter's night terrors, and now she knits socks for the poor. You start to wonder if these miracle children are real, or simply the fever dreams of marketing departments run wild. Behind the spectacle, a cottage industry blooms. Housewives trade empty bottles and compare notes on which brands work fastest, taste best, or have the most appealing labels. The local print shop does a roaring business producing pamphlets, posters, and coupons for the latest concoction. You hear rumours that some parents pick a new syrup each week just to keep up with the neighbours, and perhaps to keep hope alive that the next one will finally deliver on its promise. The irony is not lost on you. The more desperate you feel, the more persuasive the slogans become. Each advertisement seems to whisper, "You're doing your best, but you could be doing better." There's reassurance in the ritual, even as you wonder how many of these solutions are pure invention. In quieter moments, you dream of a world without endless remedies and relentless marketing. A world where parenting isn't measured by the labels in your cabinet, but by the small, stubborn victories of getting through another day. But for now, you tuck another sample bottle in your bag, smile at the next impossibly happy baby in the window, and resign yourself to the fact that, in the 1860s, advertising is as much a remedy for parental anxiety as the medicine itself. After all, if a label says it's safe, approved, and guaranteed, who are you to argue? At least until next week's miracle cure rolls into town. The bottle warns of mild side effects, but the list is longer than your grocery bill. Nausea, constipation, possible time travel. You wonder if it's safer to just let the children ride it out. You stare at the label, squinting to decipher the fine print curling around the bottle like an anxious snake. The first few lines are almost reassuring. Slight drowsiness, occasional dizziness. Then things get creative, intermittent giggling, temporary loss of appetite for turnips, spontaneous napping. Somewhere in the middle, the list takes a turn for the surreal, excessive politeness, sudden urge to sing sea shanties, feelings of existential contentment, and, if you're really unlucky, auditory hallucinations featuring barnyard animals. The directions for use are as vague as a politician's promise. Administer as needed, but not too often. Repeat if symptoms persist, unless they stop, in which case, do not repeat. You try to picture the original author, perhaps a weary chemist, perhaps a bored poet, perhaps a parent themselves, torn between offering relief and offering plausible deniability. Modern medicine has its warnings: dry mouth, drowsiness, consult your doctor, but 1860s medicine is on a different level. One bottle claims may cause a gentle swelling of the spirit. Another suggests possible growth of additional teeth, which you hope is a translation error. Your favourite, though, is the one that claims soothing dreams and occasional visitation from benevolent ancestors. If nothing else, the side effects are more interesting than the average bedtime story. It's not just the children who get the warnings. Every parent in town has a tale. It helped with the cough, but he spoke only in riddles for a week. The rash cleared up, but now she can smell thunderstorms. My son's fever vanished, but he developed a passionate love for pickled onions. You begin to suspect that the real magic of 19th century medicine is the sheer unpredictability. Each spoonful is a gamble, a roll of the dice, a hope that today's remedy will not become tomorrow's folklore. But the risk weighs on you, especially at bedtime. You measure doses with the trembling precision of a bomb disposal expert. You debate out loud with your spouse, with your own conscience, whether to treat the fever or let nature run its course. Is the cure worse than the complaint? Will the neighbours judge if your child spends the night singing about whales? Will anyone, in fact, notice? On some nights you decide caution is best. You let the children ride it out, stacking pillows and fetching water and preparing cold compresses, your heart sinking every time the cough gets sharper. You whisper encouragements and tell stories of your own wild childhood, how you once survived a fever with nothing but sassafras tea and your grandmother's questionable soup. Sometimes, miraculously, the illness passes. Sometimes, after hours of moaning and restlessness, you reach for the bottle anyway, promising yourself you'll try something different next time. The next morning, you conduct your own scientific review, count all toes, check for new phobias, see if anyone is speaking in tongues. You're always a little relieved and a little surprised to discover that your children remain stubbornly themselves, lively, mischievous, and full of questions about why the cat was singing last night. You can't help but laugh at the absurdity. The warnings may be long, but the list of things parents will try for a quiet night is even longer. In a world where medicine can do anything, soothe, sedate, inspire spontaneous poetry, you learn to expect the unexpected. Maybe that's the real side effect of raising children in the 1860s. A life filled with stories, surprises, and the constant, hopeful gamble that you're doing something right. So you put the bottle back on the shelf, resolve to read every label twice and keep your sense of humour handy, just in case the next round of side effects involves talking chickens or uncontrollable tap dancing. After all, in this house, anything is possible. The grandparents reminisce about the good old days when a mustard poultice and some brandy solved every problem. You wonder if their survival is proof of medical miracles or just pure stubborn luck. It's after supper, the oil lamps flickering, the air thick with the mixed aromas of wood smoke, stewed cabbage and nostalgia. The children are finally quiet, if not entirely asleep, at least pretending to be, and the grown-ups have gathered in the parlour to swap stories. As always, the conversation turns to the topic of illness, remedies, and the bold medical decisions of yesteryear. Grandpa settles into his chair, beard trembling with the force of his memories. Back in my day, we didn't have any of these fancy syrups or calming cordials. No, sir, if you had a cough, you'd slap a mustard plaster on your chest and hope for the best. Burned like the devil, but at least you forgot about your lungs. The others nod, some in agreement, some just too tired to disagree. Grandma's voice, steady and sure, chimes in. Mustard for colds, turpentine for bruises, brandy for everything else. Babies teething, dab a bit of brandy on their gums. Upset stomach, brandy with a drop of peppermint oil. Couldn't sleep, a thimbleful of brandy and warm milk. The grandchildren's eyes widen with a mixture of horror and envy. Was there anything that couldn't be fixed with a bit of pantry or parlour magic? It wasn't just the remedies, but the philosophy behind them. The old folks remember a time when grit and guesswork ruled the day. You used what you had. If that meant wrapping a feverish child in damp sheets or waving a burning feather to smoke out the evil humours, well, at least you tried. If one cure didn't work, you moved on to the next, sometimes in quick succession, sometimes overlapping. Was it risky? Of course. But when you're fighting illness with whatever you find in the kitchen or the field, creativity becomes a survival skill. Somehow, against the odds, the grandparents are still here, living proof that either the human body is surprisingly resilient or that the universe rewards those too stubborn to die of mustard poisoning. They boast about it with a twinkle in their eyes. We didn't have all these doctors and bottles. We had fresh air, lard, and a good sense of when to ignore complaints. Grandpa recalls walking 3 miles to school in a blizzard with chilblains, patched-up boots, and half a potato as lunch. Grandma talks about living through a fever that burned through the whole county, and coming out the other side with only a few new freckles and a lifelong aversion to onions. Their stories blur the line between cautionary tale and badge of honour. There's an odd pride in having survived a time when every illness was a test of endurance, and every treatment a little bit of an experiment. The unspoken lesson: if they made it through, you probably will too, though you're expected to complain less and recover faster. You listen, caught between admiration and skepticism. You're not sure what's more impressive, their faith in household remedies or the sheer amount of brandy everyone apparently consumed for medicinal purposes. You suspect half the secret to grandparental longevity is equal parts strong stomach, selective memory, and a healthy disrespect for instructions. As the stories wind down, Grandma tucks a quilt around a sleepy grandchild and mutters, "What these children need is a mustard poultice and a brisk walk." Grandpa winks at you, raising a glass of brandy naturally. To tougher times and tougher people. You can't help but feel a certain gratitude for modern medicine, but also for the old wisdom that insists a little luck, a little grit, and a lot of stubbornness might be the best remedy of all. The house is finally quiet. You tiptoe through a cloud of medicinal smells and tuck your children in. There's a full moon outside, a bottle of syrup on the nightstand, and the creeping realization that, in the 1860s, sleep was always just one drop away if you dared. The day's relentless chorus of complaints, coughs, and chaos has faded into soft breaths and dream-heavy silence. You move from bed to bed, smoothing a blanket here, brushing a curl from a sweaty brow there, careful not to disturb the thin peace you've worked so hard to broker. The sweet, spicy scent of laudanum still lingers, mingled with the earthiness of camphor, the sharpness of peppermint, and the faint trace of whatever herbal concoction was last suggested by a well-meaning neighbour. Every child is finally still. One lies sprawled like a starfish, mouth agape, clutching a raggedy doll. Another curls tightly under the covers, brow furrowed in sleep, perhaps working out the last mysteries of the day in their dreams. The baby snores gently, mouth sticky from the evening's final spoonful, a half-eaten teething biscuit clinging to the sheet. Their chests rise and fall in the lamplight, steady and reassuring. You pause by the window, listening to the hush that blankets the world beyond your small home. The familiar noises of the day, clattering pots, squabbling siblings, frantic footfalls, are replaced by the quiet chorus of crickets and the distant bark of a dog who refuses to surrender to the night. You wonder for a moment how many other houses in town are wrapped in this same fragile truce. Parents everywhere sitting by the bedside, holding their breath, hoping the peace will hold until dawn. On the nightstand, the bottle of syrup gleams like a relic, both comfort and curse. Its label promises rest, safe for children of all ages, but you know the price of that promise. A parent's worry, a measured risk, a prayer whispered into the darkness that you got it right this time. In some other age, you think parents might have relied on songs, on stories, on gentle hands and warm milk. But here now, in the unpredictable wilderness of the 1860s, sleep comes bottled and bittersweet. You sit at the edge of your own bed, boots unlaced, hands heavy. There is triumph in this quiet, a small victory in each child's even breath, each peaceful face. But there is also fatigue, the exhaustion of a day spent guessing, improvising, loving through the uncertainty. Tomorrow there will be new fevers, fresh bruises, the next great family debate over whose turn it is to try the mysterious blue potion from Mrs. Evans' pantry. But tonight, you let yourself be grateful for the mundane miracle of sleep. As you douse the lamp and slip beneath the covers, you wonder if your children will remember any of this. The taste of sweet syrup before bed, the sound of your footsteps in the hallway, the feeling of being watched over long after they drifted off. Maybe, years from now, they'll roll their eyes at stories of how you dosed them with laudanum for every ailment. Or maybe they'll remember how fiercely you wished for their comfort and their safety, even if your methods were a little Victorian. The moon casts a pale path across the floorboards, illuminating the quiet battleground where you've waged your nightly campaign. You smile at the absurdity of it all, the science, the superstition, the hope contained in every drop. Parenting in the 1860s means never being certain, but always trying. It means balancing on the thin edge between healing and harm, between worry and wonder, and as sleep finally finds you, you say a silent goodnight to the generations who came before and to those who will come after. Parents who, like you, have stood watch in the dark, trusting in love, luck, and a little laudanum to see them through the night. You stop by the local apothecary, a dim, wood-scented shop crammed with jars, bottles, and suspicious boxes tucked behind the counter. You ask for something to help your child sleep through the neighbour's piano practice. The apothecary grins, rummages in a drawer, and hands you a bottle with a faded label, something about calmative essence. Directions? None. Ingredients? Probably best not to ask. You hope for a quiet night and pray you haven't just bought industrial cleaning fluid with a hint of mint. This is the secret heart of the 1860s medical world, the apothecary's counter, a mysterious crossroads where science, guesswork, and a pinch of showmanship meet. The shelves are stacked high with tins of powder, dark glass bottles, and little paper parcels labelled in handwriting that ranges from elegant to completely illegible. The air itself hums with the scent of camphor, licorice, and the faint undercurrent of secrecy. The apothecary is a man, or sometimes a woman, with an encyclopedic knowledge of ailments and a talent for creating something for what ails you from whatever's handy. He listens to your request with a professional nod, then produces a bottle that looks like it's lived through 3 economic panics and at least 1 barn fire. Calmative essence, he repeats, as if you both know what that means. Very effective, only needs a drop or 2. Works on children, dogs, and the occasional fussy mother-in-law. You eye the bottle, which contains a cloudy liquid that seems to swirl of its own accord. There's a handwritten note tucked beneath the wax seal. May cause drowsiness, silence, and an improved disposition. You're not sure if that's a promise or a threat. At home, you set the bottle on the kitchen table, gathering the family like an audience at a magic show. Your spouse raises an eyebrow. The children hover, fascinated by the idea that this little glass vial might banish the neighbour's endless attempts at chopsticks. The cat, as always, is first in line, sniffing the cork with the wariness of someone who has seen what happens when medicine goes wrong. You test a single drop in a spoon. It's viscous, sharp-smelling, and oddly sweet on the finish. You recall that old proverb, never trust a medicine that tastes good, but desperation outweighs caution. You measure out the smallest dose you dare, offer it to your child, and wait. The results are both immediate and suspiciously impressive. Your child's eyes flutter, their body relaxes, and within minutes, the relentless bouncing and whining give way to a gentle, peaceful quiet. The rest of the family watches, wide-eyed. The neighbour's piano is still faintly audible, but suddenly no one seems to mind. You wonder, of course, what's actually in the bottle. Is it laudanum with a splash of mint? Is it a secret blend of herbs? Could it be leftover absinthe from last New Year's? You resolve to ask the apothecary next time, knowing full well that he'll wink, change the subject, and sell you something even more mysterious. But as the evening wears on, you find yourself grateful. The house is calm. The children are asleep and the peace is so unusual, it feels almost suspicious. You check on your child just to be safe and find them breathing deeply, their face soft in the moonlight. You make a mental note. Whatever was in that drawer, it was at least half magic, half miracle, and possibly, if you're lucky, not even flammable. In the end, you place the bottle back on the shelf, next to the peppermint oil, the cough syrup, and the tin of mystery powder from Aunt Ruth. You remind yourself that parenting in the 1860s means always living a little on the edge, of knowledge, of safety, of sleep. And sometimes, the best you can do is trust the apothecary's smile, pray for a quiet night, and hope that tomorrow's remedies come with a label, a recipe, or at least a better story. Because if there's one thing more powerful than Victorian medicine, it's the faith that, somehow, you'll all wake up just fine in the morning. It's portrait day, a rare treat. You've bribed the children with sweets, but they're squirming, bored, and perilously close to knocking over the camera. The photographer suggests a bit of syrup for nerves. 5 minutes later, everyone's serene, glassy-eyed, and the family portrait is the sharpest image you've ever seen, if a little drooly around the edges. Portrait Day in the 1860s is an event that ranks somewhere between a visit from the preacher and the arrival of the travelling circus. Word spreads quickly. He's in town for one day only, setting up his mysterious contraption in the sunniest corner of the parlour. There's a flurry of frantic preparations, best dresses shaken out and aired, faces scrubbed until cheeks glow pink, and hair parted with a ruthlessness reserved for special occasions. The older children sulk about looking like wax figures, while the youngest, hopelessly sticky from breakfast, tries to hide under the table. The photographer, an odd mix of artist and magician, enters with all the solemnity of a visiting dignitary. He carries an alarming array of equipment, heavy tripods, glass plates, black velvet curtains, and a mysterious case full of bottles that smell strongly of chemicals and even more strongly of secrets. It's important to keep still, he announces, very still, no blinking, no scratching, No sudden moves, please." The children respond by immediately fidgeting, crossing their eyes, and initiating a wrestling match over who gets to hold the dog. You make one last attempt to wrangle order, bribes, threats, and appeals to family pride. Nothing works. The photographer, long acquainted with the wild unpredictability of children, leans over and quietly asks, "Have you got any of that soothing syrup handy? Or shall I?" He produces a small, familiar-looking bottle from his satchel, as if this is part of the standard kit. Just a sip for nerves, he winks, works wonders for the little ones, and the not-so-little ones too. Syrup is doled out in careful doses, one for each child, a smaller one for the dog, and, after a quick conspiratorial look, a small taste for you too. The result is nothing short of miraculous. The room, moments before a circus tent of chaos, becomes a tableau of serenity. The children slump gracefully into their seats, eyes half closed, content to simply exist in the golden haze of syrup-induced calm. The photographer works quickly, arranging limbs and faces with the gentle touch of someone who has seen every kind of fidget and tantrum known to mankind. "Now hold very still," he whispers, as the camera's shutter opens and closes with a satisfying click. In this brief, magical window, your family manages to present a united, peaceful front, a miracle recorded in silver nitrate for generations to come. You glance around at your offspring, all of them oddly cooperative, not a single tongue poking out or hair out of place. Even the family dog, who usually panics at the sound of thunder or his own reflection, sits dignified in the centre, eyes glazed, tail thumping softly against the floor. The photographer grins, snaps another plate and mutters, "Best group I've had all week." Of course, the moment doesn't last. Within the hour, the syrup begins to wear off. The children blink, yawn, and immediately start poking one another. The baby resumes chewing the corner of her dress. The oldest claims not to remember sitting for the portrait at all, but the photograph, a perfect, strangely dreamy slice of your family's reality, remains as proof that, with a little medicinal assistance and a lot of luck, it's possible to capture a rare moment of harmony, even if only for the length of an exposure. As you tuck the finished portrait into the family Bible, you reflect on the absurd genius of the era, when a travelling photographer, a bottle of soothing syrup, and a dash of parental hope could immortalise your family, drool and all in peaceful unity, forever outsmarting the chaos, if only for a single syrup-sweet second. The weather turns, the windows rattle, and suddenly every child in the house is sniffling and coughing in harmony. You consult your medicine shelf and realise you have a different bottle for every symptom: cherry for coughs, licorice for fevers, peppermint for melancholy. You measure out teaspoons with the precision of a medieval alchemist, silently wondering if you're medicating your kids or inventing the world's sleepiest choir. Outside, rain drums a steady beat on the roof, and the wind howls through the cracks in the windows with a vengeance only the 1860s can deliver. Inside, the house is a symphony of misery. Noses running, throats raw, and children wrapped in blankets that smell faintly of damp wool and despair. Even the dog looks concerned, curled up by the stove as if hoping the weather and the coughing will just go away. You sigh, pulling your well-thumbed book of household remedies from its perch above the fireplace. The page for ailments of the cold and wet months is dog-eared and annotated in the frantic handwriting of generations. There's a recommendation for goose fat on the chest, another for mustard foot baths, and a third for a lively walk in brisk air. Advice clearly written by someone who never had 5 children to wrangle in a downpour. But it's the medicine shelf that holds your true arsenal. Each bottle has its role to play in the battle against seasonal suffering. The cherry syrup, thick and sweet, goes first, parcelled out to anyone with a hacking cough. It's a family favourite, mostly for the flavour, though you suspect the real appeal is the dose of opiates hidden beneath the cloying sugar. For fevers, there's the licorice elixir, so black it stains spoons and tongues alike. Peppermint cordial is reserved for the general malaise that always seems to strike after the 3rd day of drizzle. A tonic for the blues that promises to cheer but mostly sedates. You line the children up like patients in a field hospital, checking foreheads, counting sneezes, and doling out medicine by symptom. This for the cough, that for the chills, and a little of this if you're feeling especially gloomy. The youngest tries to negotiate for extra cherry syrup, while the oldest attempts to feign good health in hopes of avoiding the licorice. You're unmoved. Fairness, in this house, means everyone gets a dose, willing or not. The kitchen becomes your laboratory. You mix and measure, calculating which combination might yield a silent afternoon, or, at the very least, a break from the chorus of complaints. The smell of syrup mingles with the scent of wet boots and boiling potatoes. A stray draft sends a shiver through the house, and you briefly consider dosing yourself with something labelled Doctor's Little Helper just to make it through the next hour. Within half an hour, the effects become apparent. The coughing slows. The sniffles are replaced by drowsy sighs. One by one, the children sink into their blankets, eyelids drooping, voices growing softer until the only sound left is the rain and the occasional satisfied snore. You catch your own reflection in the window, hair wild, eyes weary, but at least, for now, no longer outnumbered. You sit for a moment, mug of weak tea warming your hands, savouring the rare peace. Maybe the remedies are working, or maybe the children have just surrendered to exhaustion. Either way, you're not asking questions. The dog, emboldened by the quiet, creeps onto the sofa and joins the sleeping heap of blankets. You know the storm and the illness will return. Tomorrow there will be new complaints, fresh symptoms, and another round of syrup-stained spoons. But for now, you count your blessings, grateful for the tiny bottles lined up on the shelf, the rain washing the world clean, and the strange comfort of a house finally at rest. In the end, whether you're curing coughs or composing a lullaby, all you really want is for everyone to make it through the rainy season, a little quieter, a little cozier, and hopefully none the worse for all the medicine. Cousin Henry arrives for a week, full of energy and modern ideas like playing outside, reading books, and questioning the wisdom of dosing children with opiates. By the end of day 2, you're considering whether to medicate him or yourself. The household settles on compromise: chamomile tea for Henry, morphine syrup for everyone else, and a gentle warning to avoid the medicine cabinet if you value your eyebrows. The first morning, Henry bounds into the kitchen with a grin, clutching a book about insects and a handful of slightly traumatized beetles. He's the city cousin, sharp, loud, and bursting with questions about why the parlour has a faint medicinal smell and why your siblings are also, well, calm. Don't you get bored, he asks, before inventing 3 new games that result in overturned chairs, spilled milk, and a chase involving a chicken, the cat, and your youngest in pursuit. By noon, your own siblings have the glassy-eyed look of survivors, while Henry zips from room to room with the stamina of someone who's never been introduced to laudanum. You catch your mother eyeing the medicine shelf with increasing frequency. By tea time, as Henry organises a mud pie contest in the backyard, your parents have a quiet conference. Can you put the visiting cousin down for a nap with the rest, or would that spark an international incident? In the end, they try the subtle approach: chamomile tea, sweetened with enough honey to drown any suspicion. Henry, being Henry, declares it boring but drinks it anyway, then promptly asks for another round of hide-and-seek. Meanwhile, your mother lines up your siblings for their afternoon tonic, distributing the syrup with a practiced hand and a soothing pat on the head. Within 15 minutes, the house falls into a drowsy hush, except for Henry, who has constructed an elaborate fort and is staging a battle between his beetles and the leftover peas from lunch. The contrast is stark. Your siblings melt into their chairs, content to stare at dust motes or the vague idea of supper. Henry, alone and unmedicated, is a one-boy hurricane. He pokes and prods, poking fun at the sleepyheads, declaring them boring country folk. Your parents, their patience frayed by the volume and velocity of his curiosity, begin to regret not dosing themselves as well. On the 3rd day, the apothecary delivers a new bottle of evening cordial. Henry inspects it closely. "What's in it?" he asks. The room falls silent. "Herbs," your mother says at last, "and hope." Henry snorts but takes the hint. That night, he accepts another mug of chamomile and retreats to bed, still awake and humming. Your siblings, however, drift off without complaint. Soothed by the familiar fog of morphine and routine, you and your parents exchange exhausted glances, hosting Henry as a crash course in patience and humility. He questions everything: why you nap after lunch, why the medicine smells like licorice and old socks, and perhaps most damningly, why you don't just let your bodies do the work of growing up. His skepticism is infectious, and for a moment you wonder if maybe there's something to his modern ideas. But as another storm of shrieks erupts from the parlour, you decide that old-fashioned has its virtues, namely silence. By the end of the week, Henry's energy shows no sign of abating, but your household has adapted. The medicine cabinet is locked, the syrup reserved for emergencies, and Henry's visits, though memorable, are scheduled with caution. You suspect that in the end every family finds its own balance, a little chamomile for the rebels, a little morphine for the rest, and a secret hope that everyone somehow survives the summer. And if you ever doubt your methods, you just remember Cousin Henry, proof that sometimes the best medicine is a locked door and a very, very early bedtime. So tonight, as you drift off in your clean bed, no mysterious bottles on your nightstand, no questionable syrup in your tea, take a moment to marvel at what people once called good parenting. Because if there's one thing history proves, it's that humans will try just about anything to survive the chaos of raising children, even if it means handing out morphine like it's candy. The 1860s were an age of hope, hustle, and heroic levels of denial. Parents juggled everything, sickness, stress, heartbreak, and toddler tantrums, with nothing but sheer determination, dubious remedies, and an unwavering belief that a teaspoon of laudanum could fix almost anything. Their nights were long, their cabinets crowded, and their worries well. They were probably asleep by 7 p.m, with a little help. But let's not just laugh at them, let's honour them too. These were people doing their best with what they had, fighting for comfort and peace in a world where pain relief came with a warning label that no one could read, and every bottle was a roll of the dice. They survived plagues, panics, and children who apparently never, ever ran out of energy. And somehow, through all the mayhem, they still loved, endured, and stubbornly kept going. So, as you settle in tonight, safe from snake oil, patent medicines, and soothing syrups with secret recipes, give a quiet thank you to the parents who came before you. Because while their methods were occasionally terrifying, their resilience was the real miracle. They muddled through, adapted, and, mostly, survived, paving the way for a world where just take a nap is sounder advice than just take some morphine. Rest easy, knowing your worst parenting fail will never be immortalized on a bottle of Victorian medicine. And as you drift into sleep, remember, history may be absurd, but it's also proof that people are hopeful, hilarious, and occasionally out of their minds, but always in the end incredibly strong. Good night, and may your dreams be soothing and strictly drug-free.